And I'd love to introduce, for more of our education and edification, Adelmo Vigil.
Thank you, Barbara. Well, she read my speech. I was sitting there thinking, well, you know, she might as well go ahead and read the rest of it, you know? That way I won't have to get up. I also try to get our president to go ahead and use the time for the auction instead of my speech, which he wouldn't go with that. They would not go with that. The National Federation of the Blind knows that blindness is not the characteristic that defines you or your future. Every day we change, we raise expectations, because low expectations create problems between blind people and our dreams. You can live the life you want. Blindness is not what holds you back. Before I was born, my mother had decided, she had already determined, that she was not going to raise me. She said if she could find someone to take me, to raise me, she would do that, because she already had 6 children before me. And that it was too much for her to have another child in her home. My aunt and uncle, which I will refer to as my parents as I go through this, they decided that they would adopt me. They had a young daughter, a daughter who passed away at 3 months, and they could never have any more kids. So when I was born, my mother, my aunt, went and stayed with my biological mother and helped her with the rest of the children and helped her with me. 7 days later, my mom took me home. I did forget, maybe I didn't mention it to you, but my biological parents had 6 more children, 6 more boys after me. So I don't know how tired or how bad it was, but you know what? To me, that was the biggest blessing that it could have ever happened to me. My parents raised me believing in my abilities. They knew that all I needed was a chance. With the love that my parents demonstrated to me, the hope that they had in me, and the determination that they had, they transferred my dreams into reality. And that is exactly why I am here today. We were not strangers to blindness. I had 3 uncles, 1 aunt who were blind. They were my biological mom's brothers and sister, my adopted dad's brothers and sister. We were not strangers to that. My biological parents had 2 other children who were blind. 3, 2 boys and 1 girl. Unfortunately, they did not have the opportunity that I had to have the parents that hoped and believed in me. And they did not have the opportunity to be part of this National Federation of the Blind family like I have today. One of my brothers was killed in a sawmill accident. He was working in a sawmill. My other one lives in California somewhere. My sister passed away from cancer. One thing she said, when she was very ill, she said, "Adelmo," she goes, "blindness never killed me, but cancer is going to take me." And I think about that many times. She did not have the opportunity to go to school like I did. She did not have the opportunities to get an education like I did. But one thing, she had the determination that she was going to be successful, that she was going to do something and live the life that she wanted. My uncles, I had one uncle who worked in the sawmill, in the logging industry. Well, I knew that that was not what I wanted to do. My other uncle worked in a sheltered workshop, getting paid sub-minimum wages for making brooms. And my third uncle stayed at home and complained about my grandfather and said, it's all his fault. The blindness comes from his side of the family, and was very bitter. And he decided that he did not need to do anything because he felt that somebody else would come and do it for him. And that was what he spent his life. I mentioned my uncle who worked in the broom shop. One thing that he had, he was determined to do something for himself. But the opportunities that he had because of the lack of education were limited. And when he went to the broom shop, that's all he thought that he could do because he was blind. That's what he believed, and that's what they led him to believe, that that was it for him. He was very handy. He always worked at his house and built fences and did everything he could. There was no limits to what he could do, but nobody ever told him that he could do more, that he could live the life that he wanted and get paid a lot more than sub-minimum wages. When I think about that, I think, thank God that my mother decided to have me to be adopted, because I had the support from my parents. I often wondered as I was growing up, what am I going to do when I grow up? I know nobody in this room has thought that before. I have. I thought about it. And I thought, I lived out in a little country, in a little country town out there, northern New Mexico, where there was no transportation, still no transportation. The nearest community little store was about 2.5 miles away. So, if I wanted to go to the store, I had to walk. But you know what? I did not have time to be cruising up and down the street to the store, because I was helping my dad stack hay, go cut wood, fix fences. All of those things are what made me be what I am today, because they, again, believed in me. When I was 13, my parents realized, well, at age 5, my parents realized that I was having some problems with my vision. Well, probably a lot earlier than that. But at the age of 5, my mom took me to Pueblo, Colorado, and had a doctor see me there. And that's when I was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. I had no night vision. And I used to get in trouble because Mom would tell me to get something, and I'd reach over and knock it over. And my mom would say, oh, come on, why can't you be careful? Well, you know, my depth perception was so bad. But while I was attending public schools, I could not see the print in the books. I struggled. Even a magnifying glass didn't work. My vision was so bad that I remember coming out of, getting off the bus, coming from school. And we lived probably 100 yards from the main road. And I started running toward the house. Well, guess what? My vision was so bad that I ran into the house. And I bounced back, fell on my back. My mom comes out and she goes, what happened? I said, well, the house was there. I didn't see it. After that, my mom had come out and stopped me as I was getting closer to the house. And I often have said, I'm not sure if she was really concerned about me or she was afraid I was going to break my glasses. That's the fact I wore, because I wore thick glasses, I mean, but they were magnifying glasses, and they still didn't help. At the age of 13, my parents made a very difficult decision. They decided that they would be sending me to the School for the Blind in Adelmo, over 300 miles away. My mom went with me on the bus to Adelmo to drop me off at the school. When I was there, the day that she left, I felt so offended. I felt like, what had happened to me? Why did this happen? But as I started to find friends, talk to people there, I thought, okay, it's not too bad. But the problem that I still had there was the School for the Blind handed me large print books. And they said, well, use your vision. Use the sight that you have. So I did that. I still did not know how to read. I still couldn't read. I used to have to turn in an essay on Monday. I used to work on it during the weekends. And I would remember memorizing what I wrote, because when I went back to school on Monday morning to go to my English class, I had to read my essay. I couldn't read my writing. I couldn't read a typing. If I typed it, I couldn't see it. And one day, they had an appointment set for me, and I went to the eye doctor, and I came, the eye doctor said to me, your sight is getting really bad. You need to learn Braille. And I said to the eye doctor at that point, I said, that is the best news that I've had. I like that. On my way home, back to the school, I was with the school nurse, and she says to me, Adelmo, I have some real bad news for you. Now think about that. Bad news because I needed to learn Braille? And she said to me, you are going to have to learn Braille. My reply, and I must have been pretty sassy at that point, and I said to her, that is the best news I have heard yet. I might learn to read, because they were not expecting me to read, I guess. They wanted me to use my vision. I couldn't do that. Now, some of you might be saying, that was back in the 60s. Yes, it was back in the 60s. But you know what? It is still happening today. I just heard of a young child in New Mexico before I came here to this convention that has hand motion on one eye. The other eye is very poor, and the IEP team and the teacher said he does not need to learn Braille. He can still use his vision. Now, why? A lot of us might say, things have changed. Yes, they have. But you know what? We still have a long way to go. We still need to make sure that our children in the public schools and in the schools for the blind are getting the proper training that they deserve. There is no reason why they should not know Braille. There is no reason why they should not be able to use a cane. We have lots of work ahead of us. Well, after graduating from high school, and I mentioned to the group this morning, I had a principal before I graduated from high school. We had some dorm parents that, again, if you all look around, think about your life, There's always somebody there that believes in you. But sometimes, people that you think that should believe in you don't. And I remember Mr. Othick going over to the principal's office to talk to the principal about something. The principal of the School for the Blind told Mr. Othick, our dorm parent, said, Adelmo will never amount to anything. He is not smart enough to do anything. And my mentor, my support at the School for the Blind said, Adelmo is going to survive, and he is going to make it in spite of anything that you might think. I appreciated that support. And maybe it was a good thing that this principal said what he did. Because when Mr. Othick told me that the principal had said this, I said, I am going to show him that I'm going to do something. About 10 years later, I had been serving in the border regions, and they invited him to be the guest speaker. And so I happened to be there at a reunion. And he came up to me, and I had been teaching. I had received my bachelor's in elementary ed. And he comes up to me and he says, well, Adelmo, he says, I understand you've done pretty good for yourself. And believe me, I wanted to say something that wasn't very nice. But sometimes it's better to just not say it than to, land up having to eat your own words, I guess, or I don't know. I just decided I wasn't going to do it. I was going to be the more mature person at that point. I went to college, and again, Mrs. Othick, Mr. Othick's wife, told me one day, she says, Adelmo, if you want to do anything for blind children, blind adults, sighted children, sighted adults, you need to get yourself to college. Because I thought, maybe I could just work at the School for the Blind, working at the dorm or something, just a job that I didn't have to go to school. And she says, no, you're going to college. And, we made arrangements, and I went to Western New Mexico University. I started going there, and in 1973, when I started, I met a young lady. And a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, introduced us to each other. And I remember him saying, Adelmo, I want you to meet a friend of mine here. This is Soledad Gamon. And I said, and then he said, this is Adelmo. And, we said hello and everything. The next day, I was walking back to class from the cafeteria, from class to go eat lunch. This young lady is standing on the sidewalk there, across the cafeteria, and she said, well, hi. I said, hello. She goes, can I cross the street with you? And I said, sure. Well, I can tell you that for the last 41 years, we have been crossing streets together. That is my wife. I received my teaching degree in in Silver City. Did my student teaching there. But one thing I do want to share with you is that I had an evening class, and I was wondering, one of the things that I always thought about was, I don't want to have to go back to the School for the Blind to do my student teaching. I feel that I should be able to do it in the public schools. Now, I still was not a member of the National Federation of the Blind. I had heard many things about the NFB. They weren't very nice, And so I didn't get involved, and we didn't have a very strong affiliate back then. So I, kept going to college. Well, this person that I met in college, in one of my classes, we were talking, and I said, well, what do you do for what's your job? He said, I'm an elementary school teacher. I'm a third grade teacher. I saw my opportunity. And I believe that many times we have to be thinking ahead. We have to be prepared and think. So I told him what I was thinking and my fears that I was going to be sent back to Alamogordo to do my student teaching. And he said, Adelmo, if you want to do your student teaching in my class, my third grade class, I will be happy to have you in there. And so the time comes, and I go to my advisor in college, and it's time for me to do my student teaching. And he said, yeah, you need to do your student teaching. He says, but I need to call the School for the Blind to see if they'll take you. And I said, no, you don't. And he says, well, they're the only ones that will take you because you're blind. I said, no. I have someone here in the public schools that will have me do my student teaching under him. And he goes, well, I don't believe it. I said, well, believe it or not, I do. And he said, well, I'll have to call the principal and talk to them and see what they say. I said, okay, well, I'll be back tomorrow. I wasn't going to cut him a lot of slack. So I came back the next day and he said, well, Adelmo, he says, you're right. The principal said that him and this teacher had already agreed that they would take you in. And I said, okay. Well, I knew it. It was not a surprise to me. But why? Because I had already done my homework. I had already decided what I wanted to do. And I had made some choices to talk to someone. And I think that is really one of the most important things. Well, I did my student teaching, had no major problems, and decided that I was going to apply for a job there in Silver City. Well, I'm waiting and waiting, and I'm not hearing anything. The teacher that I did my student teaching said to me, he says, Adelmo, he says, the district screens the applications and then they send a list of people to the principals, the people that are available for hiring. He said, and I've talked to my principal and your name's not there. So I said, well, I wonder what I could do. And he said, well, he says, maybe this is the same guy that I worked with doing my student teaching. He said, well, maybe you should talk to the superintendent. I said, okay. Well, before that, the personnel director called me back to his office, and basically did a mock interview. He interviewed me, but he had no intentions of putting me on the list because I was blind. When I got to the superintendent's office, he welcomed me into his office, and we started talking, and he said, well, how can I help you? And I said, well, I understand that I'm not, I wanted to be a teacher here. I did my student teaching here and everything, and I want to know why my name's not showing up on the list. And he says to me, well, he says, the problem is, he says, that when the principals see on the application that you are blind, they're afraid to hire you. And I said, well, have you heard of human rights? Have you heard of discrimination? He said, oh yeah. He says, we definitely look at that. He says, in fact, we hire a lot of people with Hispanic surnames. And I'm thinking, well, Vigil? Come on, now you're really going in the wrong direction, So I said, I said, what do I need to do to make sure my name gets put on there, or that the principals get to know me? And that's where he made his mistake. He said, well, go talk to the principals, all the elementary principals, and let them know that you're interested in being hired. Well, guess who picked me up outside in front of the superintendent's office? The teacher that I had been working with. He was, again, someone that believed in me, that was giving me the support that I needed. So I told him what was going on. He says, well, he says, I happen to know a lawyer that would probably you can talk to. So we went to the schools first, and I got a copy of the list. And from there, we went to the attorney's office, and we ended up filing a Human Rights Commission report, you know. Well, during that time, I was not going to sit around and wait for them, so I applied for a job in Shiprock, New Mexico. And I called them up, told them I was interested in the job. They said, well, we need a teacher here. He said, the personnel director said, and so, can you be here on Friday? This was like on a Monday. And I said, yes. We're down about over 300 miles away again. Remember I said there's a lot of dirt between towns in New Mexico, yeah? So I get there, I call him up and he says, okay, well, he says, yeah, come on in on Friday morning for the interview. I said, okay. I have no idea how I'm going to get there. The university decided that they're going to provide the transportation to get me there. And the day before I left, I called him back and I said, well, Mr. Aragon, one thing I want you to know. And this, again, was something that I felt that I needed to do. And it doesn't always work. But I said to him, I didn't tell you when I called you the first time that I was blind. His reply, he says to me, Mr. Vigil, you went to school, you received your degree just like everybody else, he says, and I don't have a problem with it. Okay? So I said to him, okay, well, I'll see you on Friday then. We'll be there. I got to for my interview, and he starts telling me, well, you will be working at this school, and you'll be doing this, and in fact, we provide housing for teachers because we've got on the reservation, and he says, and you'll be living in so-and-so apartment where you can even walk to school. And he says, I have received so many calls. I have received so many letters from the teacher that you did your student teaching with, the university. All of these people are backing you up. He says, I guess the question I have for you, he says, as part of the interview is, do you want to come and work for us? And I said, yes, I will. That was my interview with him, you know. And I got there, I started teaching. Did I have problems with my teaching? I didn't have problems with my kids. The children accepted me. But the principal that I was working with told me, well, he says, the personnel director is twisting my arm to hire you, so I'm going to put you in a remedial math class. He said, and I'm not going to assign you any duties out on the playground. And I said, well, why not? Well, he said, because it's dangerous for you. You're blind, and it's dangerous for you to be out there in the playground. I don't think he cared about the kids. He was concerned about me getting hurt. And I said, well, there's no danger out there. I said, I can hear where the kids are. I don't have a problem going out there. He said, well, he says, what if one of these kids, because they'll do it, he says, what if one of these kids throws the ball and it hits you on the head? And I said, well, it'll probably bounce right off of it. And he said, well, yeah. I said, how many sighted teachers have gotten hit with a ball on the head? Well, he says, probably quite a few. I said, okay, so what's the difference again, you know? Well, I worked with them for 4 years, and then I transferred to another school. When I got there, I told the new principal, I said, you know, one thing I want duties like everybody else. I want to be part of this staff. And he said to me, Adelmo, don't worry about it, you will be. I was kind of sorry later that I asked for that. Because I had every duty that every other teacher had. playground duty, bus duty, breakfast duty, whatever. Not only that, but he started having me be part of curriculum committees and whatever needed to be done. I mean, somehow I got appointed for those committees. Now, again, I tell you, it was the love, the hope, and he was determined that I would succeed, you know? So as we went through that, I continued to be involved, and then in 1982, Fred Schroeder wanted me to share my story at the state convention. So I'm not going to tell you the story that I told them, because it's the same one that I just did. So we were at the convention, and my plan at that point was, I still thought that the NFB were troublemakers, whatever, and I was going to go in and tell my story and leave. Well, not with Joe Cordova and Fred Schroeder. They started putting me to work. They started asking me to do this and do that, and all of a sudden, they said, well, Adelmo, how about getting a chapter started in Chevron? And my wife and I talked about it. We agreed that that's what we were going to do. And so we started building the chapter in the San Juan County. We started working on that. I taught elementary school for 16 years, public school. One time I had 32 second graders. I had 20 some every time. One of the challenges that I had was that I had parents that would request their child to come to be in my class. At first, I had a couple of parents that said, well, I'm going to be here, I'm going to be checking because you're blind, and I don't know about my child being in your classroom. And I said, well, you're welcome to come. That parent came in once, sat there for about 10 minutes, got up, and she says, don't worry about it, I won't be back. Because I know that my child's in good hands. I believed that my children, the kids that I work with, could be responsible. I believed that they had a future. I was determined that they were going to succeed. And I was determined that they could accomplish their dreams. Now, I'm still talking about sighted kids. They're no different than blind kids. So I had kids, like I said, the teachers would request children that were troublemakers that nobody wanted in their class. They would put them in my class. And I would gladly take them. It was my challenge. And one time I had a mother come to me and she goes, well, my son's a troublemaker. How are you going to control him? You can't see him. And I said, so-and-so, come here. I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, you know what? Whatever happened last year and the year before, I was teaching third grade then, I said, you and I aren't going to worry about that. It's what we're going to do now. And we are going to change the way you are, your behavior. I said, do you agree with that? And he said, yes. I said, okay, that's all I need. And I told them all, that's all we need. And believe me, that child, I'm not going to say he was a model child, model student, but his behavior changed because I expected that from him. I knew he could do it. Well, the last year that I taught elementary classes, I would work with my kids, and I told them one day, I said, I had applied for the job as director of the orientation center. By then I had been involved in the NFB. I had been to conventions. I had felt the love that everybody showed, the energy that I could receive from attending state conventions and national conventions. And so as I decided to start working with adults, I remember telling Dr. Schroeder, I said, you know, I'd like to get a job working with a commission whenever an opening comes up. And he said, well, he says, yeah, I would love to have you. He says, but I hate to take you out of the public schools because you're the only blind person here in New Mexico teaching at that point. And I said, you know what? I've proven that I can do it. And I've proven it to myself, most of all. And he said, well, you're right. So he hired me. And he hired me to run the orientation center, which I worked there for about 4 years, 5 years, and then became deputy director of the commission. Then went back to the orientation center as deputy director, and then I was able to take care of the center and the VR program, and then I said, no, it's too much, so I went to the IL program and the center. Well, I decided that after a while I was tired of working, so I thought, I'll retire now. And I retired in 2007. Well, but 4 months later, I'm back at the center. I'm working again. I'm teaching cane travel. I'm doing whatever they needed me to do there. And then I'm doing some contract work with it. Then I decided, well, you know what? I really love teaching cane travel. So why not do my apprenticeship? So I did that. And in 2009, I did my apprenticeship. And in 2010, well, somewhere in between 2007 and 2010, I retired one more time. And then in 2009, I received my apprenticeship, my certification in O&M, and started doing that. In 2010, I became acting director of the center one more time. Wow. And I did that for another 2 years. And after 2 years, I told Greg, I said, you know, we need to hire a new director. And he said, well, are you sure? I said, yeah, I'm sure. So we hired a new director, and then I worked for about another year teaching cane travel, and then I retired one more time. I tell people, I've been very successful in my life. The only thing I failed in is retirement. Now, as I retired right in 2012, right before I retired, I became the affiliate president. So guess what? I did retire. I'm still part of this. Then, this past summer, I was elected as a board member. Now, I tell you all of this because when I talk about the kids that I have worked with, the people that I have seen, the National Federation of the Blind, change the lives, it brings joy to my heart. It gives me something to be able to move forward, to get up the next morning and look up and say, I was able to help someone. The National Federation has taught me that. Just like here in Nebraska, the New Mexico Commission for the Blind is a direct result of the National Federation of the Blind, because we knew that we had to have a commission for the blind. And we fought for a commission for the blind until we got it. Now, somebody might say, why is a commission for the blind important? I'll tell you why it's important. Because a commission for the blind that has worked with the National Federation of the Blind is going to provide the best services you can get throughout the country. I don't know about you guys today, about you who were in this meeting this afternoon, but believe me, When that young man was talking, I was choked up. It was so exciting to know what the Commission for the Blind here in Nebraska can do. But again, it's because of the philosophy of the National Federation of the Blind. When we have parents that can come up and speak about their experiences through a program at our commissions, when we have parents that can come and speak about what they learned at a national convention and how that changed their lives and how that changed that particular student's life. And when I hear that student say, yes, I can do whatever I want to do. I can live the life that I want. I can live the life that I desire. That is exactly what the National Federation of the Blind has done for me. And that is exactly what the National Federation for the Blind is doing for you. And tonight, I ask you, can we together with love, hope, and determination, can we do something about that? Can we transform dreams into realities? Yes. Can we? If nothing else, I want to leave this place thinking about that and saying, what life can I change? What student do I need to approach? We heard from the young man that's in college in music, and it's going to be a teacher. I thought to myself, wow, sounding familiar. But you know what? Together, all of us can change those lives. And with love and determination, let's go build the Federation. Thank you.